Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and I'm here with my twice weekly show. It's number 217. It's Wednesday, the 23rd of February, and it's a somewhat calmer morning here in London. As you've probably noticed if you are living in the UK, it's been a pretty wild few days around the country. So, what have I got for you today? Well, we've got some news that MAG have quit the National Motorcycle or Motorcyclists Council, depending on who you read, just a year after it was formed. Bikers riot and torch a market in Liberia. A classic biker was stopped in Spain and threatened with having his 1970 Triumph seized because he couldn't produce an MOT for it. The 2022 TT is to be streamed live online. A non-biking story, but one I think actually you might find of interest, is that banks are to introduce new checks on online shopping that could result in cards being declined. I'll look at a couple of bikes actually. There's a dearth of new bikes, so we'll look at a tribute to a 1970s Bultaco, built rather inexplicably around a 1980s BMW, and I'll also be wondering what the point of the Brabus 1300 is. Implants may help paralysed riders to walk again. And then finally, today's better biking point, I'll be having a quick look at the Highway Code Rule 3 and how it seems to be working in practice. So that's today's show. Quite a lot to get through again. So grab yourself a brew, settle yourself down, and don't forget, you can join me here at 11 on Wednesdays and Sundays, usually live, very occasionally a recorded show. If you've got any comments, any questions, anything you want to ask, do drop me a line. Feedback on the show is always welcome too, and I'm always happy to try and entertain questions on a new topic. So we have Clive, we have Alex, and we have Kevin all looking in this morning. Good to see you guys. Let's hope you enjoy today's show. So, right, okay, let's crack on then. Now, almost a year to the day since the formation of the National Motorcyclists or National Motorcycle Council, you'll see both names used. I don't know which is absolutely correct. I reported that the BMF had managed to actually spill the beans about the organisation's formation back on Wednesday, February 17th last year. We got news this week that the Motorcycle Action Group, MAG, have pulled out. Now, in a press release on Monday, the 20th of February, the Riders' Rights Organisation announced they're leaving the NMC to set up a new forum, which will be known as UK Motorcycling or UKM. So, just to recap, here's what happened. The BMF published minutes from a meeting in January 2021, in February that year, and they explained how, in response to the COVID pandemic, a platform of like-minded biking organisations was assembled to speak with one voice. Now, the minutes explained that this platform, the coalition of motorcycle organisations, had come together to put out advice about riding bikes during the pandemic, and they said it had shown the need for a unified voice to talk to government. Clearly, there had been a meeting between representatives of the BMF, the TRF, that's the Trail Riders Federation, the ACU, the Auto Cycle Union, who are responsible for motorsport in this country, and IAM Road Smart, set up the new organisation, whilst MAG was said to be supporting it on a non-financial basis. Now, since then, the National Motorcycle Dealers Association, so that's a trade organisation, has also joined. Now, to be frank, we've heard relatively little from the NMC since then. I did run an article at the end of March as they held meetings with government to develop a common motorcycle policy. And in October, the NMC did draw up a scheme to revise the tiered licence system, saying that it was no longer appropriate post-Brexit. Now, the NMC explain away their relative lack of profile by saying they're not an end user grassroots type organization and they are not for consumers to join. So presumably, just because I've not heard anything doesn't mean closed door talking hasn't been going on. Although I have to say, I'm always rather wary of organisations that claim to speak for motorcycling but don't actually tell us what they're talking about. Anyway, Anna Z, who's the BMF Political and Technical Services Director and Chair of the National Motorcyclists Council, said just a few days ago in an article on the BMF website that motorcycle organisations working together to get our voice heard is proving effective. Each member organisation can and does work on independent causes, but by working in a unified way, our voices are definitely being heard louder within government departments. So, given that statement, which literally just a few days ago, why the rift? Well, it appears MAG's objective for creating what they describe as a new discussion forum is, and I quote from the press release here, to create a collaborative meeting environment where all stakeholders can share views and opinions on what will be a challenging few years ahead for motorcycling in the UK. Explaining the move, MAG National Chairman Neil Liversidge said, "We are more than capable of communicating with government without a third party interlocutor, and we need to spend our resources efficiently. MAG has a good working relationship with all the current NMC partners and the industry representative body, the Motorcycle Industry Association. Our aim is to direct all efforts and resources towards lobbying the government, and any lobbying effort to be realistic must include the industry. We're therefore looking to build on our existing relationship with the current NMC partners and the industry. MAG over recent times has been developing an excellent working relationship with MCIA and are keen to grow this further still. It's by working more collaboratively and with all major stakeholders we will ensure all are heard by government, sensibly coordinating our lobbying efforts with each other for the benefit of UK motorcyclists and motorcycling in all its forms." Which all rather begs the question, doesn't it? Why set up a new forum outside of the existing organisation, which appears on the face of it to have been formed with the very aim of representing motorcyclists who have come together from different organisations but with a single voice? Is it because there's been a discovery that there are motorcyclists with different opinions of how they've been representative? That would be my guess, pending further information. Right. Okay. So again, if you've got any comments on that, I'll be interested to hear them. I know a lot of people who do follow the show aren't all together fond of MAG and its beliefs, but so I'll certainly be interested to hear what people have to say there. Right. Okay. Now we might have a bit of a problem with antisocial riding by some members of the motorcycling community. I use the term there loosely, but it pales into insignificance with what goes on in some countries. For instance, in the market town of Vai in Kakata province in Liberia. This was the result of a dispute between stall holders and motorcyclists. That is the apparently the market actually ablaze in the street. Now, apparently, this is what seems to have happened. The motorcyclist tried to ride down a street which was actually blocked with market stalls, and in his attempt to force his way through between the stalls, he knocked over some of the goods that were on sale. The women stall holders apparently then grabbed him off his bike and started beating him. The police intervened and arrested the boy rider, whereupon his friends started throwing rocks at the women and then set fire to the stalls themselves. The outcome of that I don't know. The police investigation was due to be held on Monday. Right, okay, a couple of comments on the MAG story there. Alex says it could be a personality thing with the new chair. Quite possibly, I don't know. Amber says MAG may not be the best solution, but they may be the best right now. Well, I do have some support for MAG. I do write their safety column every couple of months. I don't agree with everything they do, but they do get things done. I'll give them that. We wouldn't have bikes in bus lanes if it wasn't for MAG activities, I tend to think. So yes, I do tend to think that MAG are out there doing a good job on the whole. Right. You may know that I own a 1980 Honda 250, and that under UK rules, that bike no longer needs an MOT, and also is eligible for free road tax. We actually have to tax it. We just pay £0 for the road tax once it's registered as a historic vehicle. Now, I have to admit that I have considered taking it abroad for a gentle potter, but I may have to rethink the lack of MOT. That's because a report on the BMF website says that the organisation is urgently following up allegations that a Triumph Owners Club member was stopped in Spain on his 1970 T100 SS last week for a document check, and he was asked for an MOT or an equivalent certificate and told that his machine could be impounded when he couldn't actually produce one. Anna Z, who, as we've just heard, is the BMF's Political and Technical Services Director, commented, according to .gov.uk, you need the registration certificate and insurance, and I've never taken any more than that, but I will follow this up. Dolph Willigers, who's the General Secretary of FEMA, the Federation of European Motorcyclists Associations, confirmed that the issue is connected to Brexit. He said EU members can exclude historic vehicles from a mandatory periodic technical inspection, so theoretically there is no problem. However, they do not have to. As he pointed out, the UK is no longer an EU member state. The BMF has also consulted the International Federation of Historic Vehicles for comment. One website reporting the issue asked, how do people with classic vehicles provide evidence that they're roadworthy if the vehicle has classic status? It's over 40 years old and does not require an MOT at all. Well, the answer to that, I can tell you, is very simple. You can still submit your machine for an MOT. It doesn't it's voluntary, it's no longer a mandatory thing, but you can still get it MOT'd and you will still get an MOT certificate. And it's actually quite a good way of checking your machine's still roadworthy if you are not the most nimble-fingered mechanic in the world. Right, okay, so just a quick reminder. As I said, the show goes out on Sundays and Wednesdays. It goes out at 11. It's almost always live. It occasionally goes out on a recording if I'm otherwise engaged. And you can always catch up with all the old shows here on Facebook, or easier to find over on my YouTube channel where I upload them after the show finishes. We have one extra comment. Kevin says organisation objectives and mission statements, all well and good, but it's a key not to treat those they represent as mushrooms kept in the dark and fed on ... Yes, I think you're absolutely right there. And that has been my criticism of the National Motorcyclist Council. It's one of those organisations that seems to be working on our behalf, but without telling us what we want to know. Right, okay. Motorcycle racing fan, TT fan? I certainly am. I've been lucky enough to make a few visits over there in the dim distant past, but I haven't been for quite a few years, I have to say. So I've been eagerly awaiting the ITV4 coverage in the evenings of the races, and occasionally manage even to tune into the Manx Radio live commentary. But here's some good news. With the Isle of Man TT returning from its enforced 2-year break due to COVID, all practice and race week activity will be broadcast live for the first time ever. The Manx Radio will continue their live coverage, and ITV4 will also still have their nightly highlights show, but live coverage is going to be produced by Greenlight, that currently put the highlights package together for ITV4, and over 40 hours of live action will be shown on a new TT Plus channel, which will be streamed on Vimeo. Now, it will launch this April, and all the video content outside of the live racing will be free of charge. Now, when it comes to the fortnight of racing, a one-off subscription for the practice and race action will cost you a fairly bargainous $14.99. Actually, I don't think that's at all expensive, not when you compare it with the cost of a ferry over there. The coverage will be fronted by seasoned motorcycle sport presenter Matt Roberts, as it's put, Formula One broadcaster Jenny Gow, and Manxman Rick Farragher. Ex-TT racers Cameron Donald and Steve Plater will add colour content, and you'll also likely to see Mark Miller, Maria Costello, who's actually competing at the 2022 event, sidecar winner Patrick Farrance, retired Austrian racer Horst Sager, journalist John Hogan, and the TT's fastest female rider Jenny Tinmouth. From time to time. The move to live TV is in response to concerns about audience size and also to bridge gaps in the audience. The live coverage will reach fresh generations and countries where the TT isn't currently visible. Now, it says, if you have an internet connection in Timbuktu, you can watch the TT from the moment the first bike goes in qualifying to the end of the senior race. That's a massive, massive deal. And that's the TT's business development manager, Paul Phillips, talking, adding that what the event is doing is not revolutionary. And he points up that you can stream live MotoGP and World Superbikes, amongst other events. He stresses that the live content will not work without a proper year-round content stream, which will help to drive interest. So that is the intent, to have features on the full year round. So there we go. That's something to look forward to for the summer. Alex says that the TT visit is on his bucket list. If you can get there, Alex, do. It's great fun. It really is a very, very special event. Now, something that's not strictly motorcycling, but maybe of interest, is that the banks are going to be introducing new checks on online shopping. Since many of us actually do buy goods, even entire motorcycles, online, these checks could affect you as they apply from March the 14th to more expensive items. And it's the latest in a series of moves to tackle fraud using stolen credit card and debit card details. Buyers may be asked to confirm their identity, perhaps by using a one-time passcode sent by text, or a PIN number, or by logging into a banking app. Now, if the buyer's identity can't be confirmed, the card could be declined. But financial experts are warning that the measures aren't just going to affect buyers who aren't aware of what's happening, but that many online businesses are also unprepared and could be impacted as buyers will fail to complete these online checkouts as the payment is declined, even when there's no issue with the card itself. So it appears that some card issuers have already started declining larger transactions. So if you've had mystery failures when buying online, this could be your problem. Right, okay. Now, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Elevenses. One of the things that I've actually noticed, even in this relatively short period, is that the stream of new motorcycle models has actually pretty much dried up. We've been drip fed sort of variations on a theme. The RS 650 Kawasaki, for example, is one. The numerous different versions of the MT-07 is another. But aside from that, my sort of newsfeed is actually full of customs and what are known as Resto mods, which is a term that I have taken to mean is an old motorcycle that should have been buried at birth, and it's been rebuilt to make it look even more ghastly than it did when it came out of the factory. Or in some cases, it's actually taking a practical motorcycle and turning it into something which has removed any hint of practicality. And I feel that is what has happened here. Now, this here, you may recognize, it's a BMW. It's actually an R80 RT. You're probably more familiar with the R100. The R80 was the sort of a slightly less popular model of the bike. Now, to be frank, BMWs of that era were never my favourite bikes. They were A, too expensive, B, too heavy, and to be frank, with the exception of the shaft drive, which was nice, Japanese technology was actually leaving them way behind by the mid-1980s. But I have to confess that having ridden behind the RT full fairing that you see on that bike, I really could see the point of these low revving bikes. Quite a few long distance couriers, of course, trundled up and down motorways, delivering long distance packages on BMWs protected by that barn door of a sort of wind tunnel tested fairing. So, what did a Madrid based custom shop, Cafe Racer Dreams, do to one of these? Was it a tasteful rebuild that emphasized the flat twin BMW motor? No, they turned it into this. Let me bring that up big again for you. There it is. It's actually a homage to an entirely different bike. So it's the rebuild of the BMW, and you can see it's been totally stripped down. And this is the bike that it's supposed to look like. And that is a Bultaco Frontera gold medal. The Spanish brand Bultaco, their popularity peaked in the 60s and 70s, and this is basically a little known enduro bike from pretty much the end of that period. So if you're wondering why there is a huge gap on the BMW version between the seat and the tank, it's because the bike apparently uses the original Bultaco tank. But as that was designed for a much shorter bike, keeping the ergonomics approximately right for the rider, using the BMW's pegs and bars, means that the seat has to sit a lot further back, hence that visually horrid gap. Now, pity the poor rider who ends up braking hard, slides forward, and ends up sitting on the frame rails. No wonder there's a sheepskin patch on the seat to provide extra grip. I suspect you will need it. Okay, but fundamentally to me, the question is, how on earth does ripping the guts out of a rather ponderous shaft drive flat twin four-cylinder become a tribute to a chain-driven single-cylinder two-stroke that was designed from the off to be small, light and nimble? It really does beat me. Opinions on a postcard, please, and don't send them to me. I think it's horrible. I'm similarly baffled by the next bike, actually, which is the Brabus 2022 1300R. Let me bring up the picture of that. There we go. Let's just zoom in on it a little bit. Okay, slightly better, more zoom. So, consulting Wikipedia, I discovered that Brabus are a German high performance automotive aftermarket tuning company. Let's just turn that banner off, actually, which is annoying. They were founded in 1977. Their speciality is tuning Mercedes-Benz, but they also do smart and Maybach vehicles. And now it seems they've turned their attention to motorcycles, and specifically the 1290 Super Duke Evo. So what's it all about? Well, according to the Brabus website, KTM and Brabus joined forces to create the next level motorbikes, bringing together their strength, combining brands' creativity, their unique design languages, their technical engineering and manufacturing expertise, and their shared love for a new challenge. The result, a unique luxury naked bike with an instant 1 second wow factor, or perhaps in my case, an instant 0.1 second, oh my god, that's ugly response. The good news is that only 77 of each of the two color schemes of those bikes were actually on offer. Each one has been pre-booked, and presumably they will disappear into collections the moment they leave the factory, never to be seen again, which actually saves us from having to see one on the streets. So what do you think? Do you like that, or do you think it's as ugly as I think it is? Right, Mike Roberts says, or Alex, let's start with Alex here. He says, you're making the assumption that these bikes are actually actually ridden. Alex says it's more of an artwork than a practical motorcycle. Wouldn't disagree with that. And Alex says, don't understand the fascination with naked bikes. They seem very impractical to me. Trust me, when you sit behind a fairing all day, you'll discover the joy of having something to keep the wind off. Sometimes I have to admit, the windscreen of a car is even nicer. And that's probably heresy to say to people who ride motorcycles, but hey ho, when you've ridden around in the snow and ice as much as I have as a courier, sometimes the heater and wipers are a very nice thing indeed. Right, okay, on to today's last story. There's some good news for paralysed riders because a university in Switzerland is working with implants that may be able to help them walk again. Now, it seems to be building on years of painstaking work at Lausanne's University Hospital. And they've been undertaking this pioneering work, which surgically inserts implants into the bodies of people paralyzed from the waist down by spinal cord injuries. Now, as long ago as 2014, the first studies showed that the use of direct electrical stimulation of damaged nerves in the spinal cord could allow muscles to be moved. Four young paraplegic men who had been paralyzed for several years were actually able to move their hips, their ankles, and their toes. The first work actually relied on the researchers continually monitoring the strength, frequency, and the duration of the impulses. But work with rats allowed a new system to be developed that actually adjusted the impulses automatically. Now, by 2018, the technology had progressed to the point where, thanks to these implants in the back and legs, the subjects were actually able to walk a few paces with walkers, that is. At the same time, they researchers actually observed a completely unexpected side effect. The use of the implants actually encouraged nerve fibers in the spinal cord to regrow and thus reconnect the brain to the muscles. And the latest update indicates that three men who were completely paralyzed from the waist down can now walk whilst using wheeled walking frames or crutches for support. And Jocelyn Bloch at the Lausanne University Hospital says that all three patients immediately after surgery were able to stand up and step with support. On the first day, I was able to see my legs moving, and it was very, very emotional, said Italian Michelle Roccati. Roccati was paralyzed in a motorbike crash in 2017. After 3 or 4 months of training, he could walk outside using a walker, and he now uses the implanted device for between 1 and 2 hours a day, and he can go for walks on his own. He can also stand up for 2 hours, he can cycle, he can even swim. And this is all achieved by using different programs for the implant. And the report says he finds the walking or standing helps relieve the pain caused by sitting in a wheelchair all day. So thanks for Robert, who passed that story on to me. Right, okay. Anything else I wanted to say? Don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, you can support me over on my coffee page. Helps me keep these coming for you. And £3 also gets you access to hundreds of better biking articles from the Facebook archive. So on to the last item today. It's more or less a month on from the introduction of the new highway code rules. Last week I took a look at the H2 rule regarding pedestrians. So I thought I'd just round things off by looking at H3, which is the rule that affects the way that powered vehicle operators, that's buses and trucks, vans and cars, and motorcyclists, of course, should deal with cyclists. Now, predictably, given the simmering antipathy between some cyclists and some drivers, there have been plenty of press reports about cyclists deliberately blocking drivers and then berating them for not leaving sufficient room when they finally manage to overtake. Steve Bully, who is the vice president of Dorchester Chamber of Business, has been widely reported because he said that a group of cyclists had stayed in the centre of the lane for 8 miles, refusing to let cars pass while, quote, looking back and laughing. Now, on the other side of the coin, we have had campaigning journalist Jeremy Vine wading into the debate, suggesting that cyclist safety is more important than motorists getting to their destination on time. Just over a week ago, he tweeted, "Dear drivers sitting behind cyclists in the middle of the road, their safety is more important than your punctuality. If you don't like being late, leave home earlier. Thank you." Provocative? Well, possibly. But just to remind you, the new rules advise cyclists to ride in the centre of lanes on quieter roads in slow moving traffic and when approaching junctions in order to make themselves as visible as possible. Now, frankly, none of that bothers me too much in London when I'm stuck in the 20 zone. The chances are we won't be moving at a very different speed anyway. But when you catch a group of cyclists on a road that has a 60 limit, particularly when it's uphill, and they treat it as a quieter road and cycle along the middle of the lane, despite having a queue of traffic behind, I don't think that's a reasonable interpretation of the new rules by the cyclists. And frankly, yes, it did happen to me too. Not for 8 miles, admittedly, but it was for about 2 miles. And during that period, the traffic was moving at less than 15 miles an hour because there was a hill ahead of where I was at the moment I caught the back of the queue. Now, when I did finally catch up with the group of a dozen riders, rather than sitting in a nice compact group, even if they had been sitting in the middle of the road, what they were actually doing, they could even have split into mini groups that could have been passed safely with gaps between them. But what they actually done was they kind of staggered themselves over a best part of a quarter of a mile of road with random intervals between them, and they were all riding down the middle of the road. And that's what made it so difficult to pass, particularly as they were going uphill and the traffic behind was going very slowly. Now, do the sums, and you'll see that it actually took about 10 minutes for me to get from the back of the queue to the head of the queue and to pass this particular group. Um, on a major A road. Now, had they not been holding the traffic up, I would have taken between 2 and 3 minutes to do that bit of driving. Now, I can compensate for 7 or 8 minutes extra driving time. That's not an issue to me, but for some people it is. And under the new code, the problem is that when overtaking cyclists, it says drivers should leave at least 1.5 meters of space up to 30 miles an hour and 2 meters at higher speeds. Now, something Ian observed over on my Facebook article is that on a single track lane, this makes it almost impossible to get past a cyclist unless the cyclist actually moves over. And not surprisingly, on a busy road like the one that I was stuck behind these cyclists on, it's actually difficult to find that sort of clearance against oncoming traffic when the cyclist is sitting in the middle of the lane. Now, I got a bit lucky. I found a decent gap. I was able to get past after literally just a few seconds behind them. But it was entirely predictable that some of the drivers ahead of me were rather less patient, and they did squeeze past with considerably less gap than the new rules demanded. And the driver behind me actually left it rather late to follow me, and the result was that he got a blast of the horn from a car coming the other way, the one I'd moved left to avoid with plenty of space. So now what you have here is a bunch of drivers who are annoyed and frustrated at this bunch of cyclists. So how does that make life safer for the cyclists? I really have no idea. Now, throw in difficult driving conditions, heavy rain, or even low dazzling sun, because these rules appear to have been written only with the best case scenario in mind when it's easy to see what in front of you. Now, years ago, I actually clipped a cyclist with a wing mirror. I was riding into the set or driving actually into the setting sun. I was in the standard position that a car would be on, pretty much middle of my lane. And I had absolutely no idea that there was a cyclist ahead of me. There was a donk, the mirror flipped back and banged against the side of the car. And I honestly thought I had actually hit a branch sticking out of the hedge until I looked in the mirror and saw the cyclist behind me stopped and sort of rubbing her elbow. Now, obviously I stopped and walked back, and she was okay. She was had a bit of a sore elbow, but I couldn't help but notice that she was wearing a green wax cotton jacket, which blended, of course, beautifully with the hedge that I was looking at into a low blinding sun. Now, would I have seen her more clearly if she'd been cycling in the middle of the lane? Well, possibly on a straight road, but what if I'd been approaching a bend? She would still have blended in with the hedge, and if I hadn't spotted her, I would have actually hit the bike. So sometimes there is actually a logic to staying out of trouble, and I do feel that these rules are all very one-sided. It's all very well say leave earlier, be more patient, as Jeremy Vine has done, but I'd be interested to know how the average cyclist would react if every time the traffic in London stopped, I made sure to pull into the cycle lane. That's the one with the broken line that I'm perfectly entitled to enter, by the way, to block their passage. I rather suspect that some would do what one did a couple of years ago, which was shout abuse and bang on the car roof as he went past. What happened in this case was that I'd pulled over to turn left. and that had involved entering the cycle lane, as I'm perfectly at liberty to do if it's got a broken line around it. And then I had to stop just as I started the turn, because there was actually a delivery van in the road doing a U-turn right in front of me. So what happened? The rider had to swerve to pass me on the right-hand side, and vented his anger as he went past. Okay, but of course that's not the only problem. The other aspect of the rule is this one. Cyclists now have right of way over a vehicle turning. Now, the Highway Code has always said that drivers should check their mirrors for overtaking vehicles before committing to an overtake. So, on the one hand, there is no change, but on the other hand, this now says in this diagram here, cyclists have right of way. They don't. There is no such thing of right of way. There is priority, but there is no right of way. But of course, the thing is that what you're doing here is you are making life difficult for the driver. The driver now has to double check the mirrors and, in fact, anticipate there could be a cyclist in the blind spot, which the mirrors can't show you before turning. The DFT actually says that the new rule is to give priority to cyclists going straight ahead, and that it does not seek to change the law, but rather to ensure a more mutually respectful and considerate culture of safe and effective road use that benefits all road users. You should not cut across a cyclist just like you would not cut across another motorist. Well, I wouldn't cut across a cyclist, but I wouldn't expect a cyclist to try to force a passage through the blind spot of my car when I'm clearly slowing, clearly showing an indicator, and clearly about to turn left or right. And that really is the crux of the matter. The rule simply seems to ignore the difficulty of seeing a cyclist in difficult driving conditions, particularly at night when it's raining and maybe the cyclist has no lights or ineffective lights. But what bothers me really about these rules is it's not just the advice which seems to give cyclists carte blanche to create a rolling roadblock or overtake turning cars without regard to the difficulties of the drivers, but the change in wording to a must do in the Highway Code means drivers who transgress are now open to prosecution under the catch-all careless driving rules. One cyclist in particular, you probably spotted him on YouTube, seems to have made it his life's work to report as many drivers to the police as possible. He claims on his website he's actually dobbed in several thousand via his helmet cam footage. Now, rather alarmingly, I did watch some of this, and his footage actually mostly captures what I would describe as not particularly near misses. Many would make me bat an eye if I were on my motorcycle and another a motorcycle or even a cyclist came past me in the way that he's reporting people, but he seems to think that they represent bad behavior and that he's reporting them. Now, what's going on out there on the road at the moment? Well, the vast majority of cyclists I've seen are just getting on with life as normal, getting on their bikes without deliberately imposing their right to on other road users. If there's one inevitable consequence, though, it will be accident chaser solicitors looking to make a quick buck on a collision with a cyclist. Now, the Highway Code still says that everyone is responsible for their own safety, but it clearly does lay the onus on the driver to do the looking out for the cyclist who doesn't. And you can argue that out in court, but do you really want the stress and expense of having to defend yourself? And there's one totally unanswered question in all this: how will children be taught to use the roads in the future? Nicholas Lai, who's head of roads policy at RAC, commented earlier this month. He said nobody wants to be on the right side of the Highway Code changes, but in the back of an ambulance, which I highly agree with. Jeremy Vine says, the cycling activist journalist, you can die without doing a single thing wrong or ever knowing what hit you. Now, every motorcyclist will understand that, but the vast majority of us on powered two-wheelers will also do our damnedest not to put ourselves in a position where we need other drivers to respond in a way that avoids putting us at risk. Frankly, whatever the highway code says, every road user needs to think that way. I'm not anti-cyclist, just as I am a pedestrian. Sometimes I am an occasional cyclist, and I generally believe that the idea of a more mutually respectful and considerate culture of safe and effective road use does benefit all road users, but it has to be mutual. That, by definition, it goes both ways. Riding a motorcycle or a cycle or driving a car in a way that creates conflict does not achieve that end. Right, okay, that's my rant over. That's enough on the highway code. I'm not going to come back to that again unless there's a particularly interesting story to talk about. Hopefully everybody knows what the rule changes are. That's pretty much it for today. I'll just wind down with a couple of quick reminders. Don't forget, you can sign up for March's webcast. It's coming ever closer. It's on group riding as the weather warms up and we all get to look at the sun shining again. It's Wednesday, 2nd of March at 8 p.m. The link has just gone up on screen. And we're also getting towards the end of the winter voucher offer. These again are also available, but only up till the end of February. You will save money on a course if you invest in a voucher, and you can use it pretty much any time you like up till the end of the year. Link to that is there. Right, okay, couple of comments. Let's see if I can see them. Kevin says, Rule 8.3, I find it ridiculous that if I'm on my motorcycle in London, I'm expected to wait behind slower cycles if I do not have a 1.5 metre gap. Yes, yes, and as he says, faster cycles will brush past. Yeah, okay. Mike says, I see no musts in new additional highway code. Well, I'll dig them out for you, Mike. I covered them at some length. It does say must in several different places. Right, okay, so that's it for today. Thank you very much again for tuning in. The weather out there has improved fairly dramatically, so if you are out there on the bike today, do take it easy out there. Just be careful. There will still be probably the odd fallen branch or tree or something lying around the corner somewhere in the world. Most of them, I suspect, will have been cleared up now, but just take it a little bit cautious. There will be debris around, I'm sure. So hopefully see you at the next show, which will be Sunday. So that's it from me today, Kevin Williams on ELEVENSES. Thanks for looking in.